So in relation to data security, obviously a central and key responsibility of data controllers and data processors to keep people's data secure. The regulation, like the Data Protection Act itself, is quite generic. It doesn't prescribe exactly what data security you have to put in place because, of course, technology changes all of the time. And so it's quite vague. It says that you have to take appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security appropriate to the risks of the data that you're processing. There's no one-size-fits-all. It's all part of this risk assessment and looking at measures to mitigate risk on a continuous basis. There are new and developing certification schemes, so that's something worth looking at. The government scheme, for example, although quite basic, is a good way of saying we certify that we are up to scratch in terms of data security. A couple of concepts that are carried over into the GDPR. First of all, encryption, highly recommended by the ICO for many years as a good way of securing data. The ICO has been much more inclined to fine organizations where data has been compromised in unencrypted format, and has released a paper some time ago on encryption of data, which is worth looking at. In terms of the GDPR, there are advantages to encryption because, for example, in the event of a data security incident, where data is encrypted, the risk of possible damage to data subjects can be much reduced, and therefore you may be able to conclude if data has been encrypted that there's no need to tell data subjects about the problem. The other concept that's introduced in the legislation is the concept of pseudonymization. So we also have the concept of anonymisation of data. So if you anonymize data, then it's not related to anyone individually at all and ceases to be personal data. But if you pseudonymize it, you perhaps, instead of, you strip away, for example, the name and identifiers, and you put a code so that data can't be identified with anyone individually, but you could connect back up and re-identify that data, then it's pseudonymized and is a recommended process as good practice. It's not mandated, but it's recommended as good data security practice where you can, because it enables the data to be more secure. One of the sort of biggest changes probably around in the GDPR is the mandatory requirement to notify a data security breach. So, as I said at the beginning, we're seeing a lot more of these things happening now. At the moment, there is no requirement for organisations to notify the Information Commissioner if they suffer a data security breach. It's recommended as good practice, but it's not a legal requirement. In the financial services world, of course, you may be required to notify the FCO and in other areas, telecoms, for example, as well. But at the moment, there's no legal obligation. But going forward, there will be a legal obligation if there's a risk to people's information following a data security breach, to notify the ICO as soon as possible, and in any event within 72 hours. So that's a very tight time frame to notify the data breach, because often you don't really know what's happened or why it's happened, but nevertheless you have to tell the ICO about it and provide more information as you acquire it. You may also need to tell data subjects that their information has been compromised. That's not inevitable. You don't always need to do that. It depends again on a risk assessment on whether whether there is a high risk to the data subjects about their information having been compromised. So again, a potential difficult assessment to make that needs to be done in a fairly quick time frame to decide how you approach a situation like that. And so therefore, as part of the sort of GDPR readiness programs, one of the key things to look at is putting in place an incident response plan so that you know in advance of anything happening, and heaven forbid anything should happen, but inevitably things do. If something goes wrong, that you have already thought in advance around who are the people and departments in the organisation we need to bring together, who's in charge, who's going to manage it, what are our legal responsibilities, and what do we have to do in these situations. So you've sort of pre-rehearsed, if you like, what you would need to do so that time is not lost. And importantly, potential liability that can arise from a data security breach can be managed, the risk can be managed, and risk and liability is mitigated.